Hi diddly ho, prepperinos. You probably have some idea in your mind when you hear the word prepper. You won't usually hear me calling myself a prepper, mostly because of what you're probably thinking. But am I a prepper? Are you a prepper? Is the idea you have accurate? Let's find out.
Preppers.
So-called preppers.
Doomsday Preppers.
What you would call a prepper. These survivalists are prepared for anything.
Survivalists or preppers.
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 Doomsday Preppers.
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 Hyper prepared.
Doomsday Preppers.
The Doomsday Preppers.
The word prepper has a lot of negative connotations, and it's not likely to change soon. It's partially due to depictions in popular culture and media, and partially due to, preppers. For some reason, we like to give people titles or labels. It helps us simplify and have categories, but it's always based on our own prejudices and biases, which means that we're not always right. As a label, though, it's sometimes used by the insiders when talking about themselves. They embrace it and accept it, and in spite of the negative connotation, they make it a part of who they are. It's also often used by outsiders talking about them, usually with some amount of skepticism or ridicule. My goal with this channel is to bridge the gap between people who are already hardcore and those who have just recognized the need to become prepared. Preparedness is for everyone, no matter their circumstances or experience. So I find it hard to find the right context to use the word prepper. Should I label everyone who prepares a prepper and possibly create a barrier between what I want to share and the people who don't want to be seen as extreme? Should I take the moderate approach and talk about preppers as the other and just refer to them in context of the crazy or extreme ideas? That would not only alienate people who consider themselves preppers, but it would reinforce the irrational notion some people have that if they start to prepare, they'll somehow find themselves going to the extreme and being paranoid about everything. Neither of those options makes sense, so let's talk about it. People from the outside, looking in, treat preparedness like a religion. Like there's some overarching belief system that you basically have to be converted to it, that there are certain rules and a dogmatic approach to becoming prepared, that there's a handbook that everyone has to follow to be prepared, and that everyone who prepares has the same background or motives. This couldn't be further from the truth. Outside of the laws of nature, preparedness is a choose-your-own-adventure story. It's a journey you go on. It's based on the hazards you face, the resources you have available, and your own personal circumstances. So there's no one-size-fits-all checklist. So what about the crazies? If you think preppers are the only group with crazies, just go take a look at your Facebook friends. I'm sure you know some nuts. Everyone has their crazies. If you look at any hobby or group, you have some crazy people. But they're not really all crazy. They just seem like it sometimes. Golf, theater, political parties, homeschoolers, PTA moms, church, or whatever. There are people who are a little bit too extreme sometimes. The problem with preparedness is that the whole concept is associated with the extremes, or at least with people portrayed as extreme. The thing about anything like this is that you couldn't possibly understand it until you understand it. I mean, how many avid sports fans have spent thousands of dollars for a TV and home theater system? Gamers spend a lot of money on computers or gaming consoles, and people who aren't into sports or gaming are a little bit baffled. But for those who are really into it, it makes sense, even if there's no other practical benefit. And if that's what you enjoy or what you feel is important, then it's worth it to you. For many preppers, it's not only a hobby, but it has practical benefit, and based on the world and the emergencies we face, they see it as a rational thing to do. Of course, being an avid sports fan is much more socially acceptable than preparing for an earthquake, it seems. There are also gamers and sports fans that don't invest a lot of time and money in those things because there's no sports fan rulebook either. If you don't see it as a valid use of time or money, you may not get why people do it. People who prepare are sometimes fully invested, and some take a more casual approach, and some go to the total extreme. Think of the word nerd. What comes to mind? Now, hopefully, not someone who lives in their parents' basement, who only eats Hot Pockets, never showers, and is afraid of girls, because that would be offensive. If you call someone a nerd, it's probably considered an insult, unless they know you and they know you don't mean it with all the negative connotations. This is true about most labels we give people. There are some connotations that come with it when other people use it referring to you. If a group of friends do a Lord of the Rings marathon, followed by a live-action roleplay and then maybe a game of Dungeons and Dragons, they might agree amongst themselves that they are nerds. And you might agree as well. But if someone not interested in nerdy things calls them nerds, there might be some hard feelings. These same nerds might not like to call themselves nerds, though, because of the negative connotation. There are some people who embrace labels and try to change the perception. Some who are all-inclusive, whether others want to be included or not. There are those who are gatekeepers to others. They might be interested in the same thing, but these people come up with their own definition or criteria of what counts. This is the, oh, you're not a real blank, whatever it is, as if it's not all made up anyway. So back to the word prepper. It almost always is prefaced by the word doomsday, at least by people talking negatively about those who prepare. It makes it seem a little more extreme, but not usually by preppers themselves. You could have someone who has a sustainable off-grid homestead who doesn't call themselves a prepper because maybe they don't stockpile foods. Or you might have someone who has dozens of guns, bug-out bags, get-home bags, a year's supply of freeze-dried food, but still not call themselves a prepper because they aren't planning for a doomsday scenario. So to the first, it's what you do, but to the second, it's why you do it. It probably isn't fair to assign a label to someone, but if we did, most people would call both of those people preppers, even if neither of them calls themselves preppers. To me, that's interesting. The term prepper, then, is very subjective. There is no way to classify certain people as preppers and others as survivalists and still others as something else, because it all means different things to different people. There is no authoritative definition or categorization, and if you were to try to look it up online, you would find definitions that you probably don't agree with. Again, though, this applies to labels and stereotypes in all aspects of life. Don't allow your prejudices to determine how you interact with someone. With a negative connotation of the word prepper, you get people, like myself, who shy away from using it. Even people who are more prepared than most of the population don't use the term.
I'm not Chicken Little thinking the sky is about to fall at any given moment. I'm not paranoid, and I'm not like a capital P prepper kind of guy, but I am stocked up on all kinds of food and emergency supplies, survival gear, because that's just how I roll. And I don't need to be paranoid. I'm prepared, right?
If you don't know who that was, that's John Lovell from the Warrior Poet Society. He seems to not want the negative connotation that comes with claiming the title of prepper, which makes sense. That's a pretty mild example, which I can definitely relate to. But what I find really interesting is that this kind of disclaimer happens quite a bit, often negatively though, and surprisingly also in what could be considered prepper literature or post-apocalyptic fiction or other fictional works. In the book, 1 Second After, which is probably the most prominent prepper book, an electromagnetic pulse, or EMP, disrupts all electronics and basically collapses society. In the small town the book is set in, the town council, which includes the main character, is discussing food rations and questioning whether or not they should collect everyone's food. After discussing what one family likely has stored, the sheriff is convinced it wouldn't be worth it. I doubt that would work with the Franklins, he says. At least with them and all my men being alive once we got the meat. Up in these hills we have more than a few of the old survivalist types, the kind that were real disappointed that the world didn't go to hell with Y2K. They're just waiting for someone to come up and try. In the 1980s classic post-apocalyptic book, The Postman, the author not only uses the term survivalist, which was a more common term than prepper at the time, as a generic negative term for people who prepared for situations like the book is set in, but it's also used as a name for the organized group of bad guys. The book says survivalist no fewer than 45 times, calling them egoists, gun nuts, paranoid, and actually blaming the collapse of society on them. Because just as humanity was entering a new golden age, some people were prepared, and this somehow caused the collapse of society? Yes, he lays the blame for the end of the world on those few crazies, as he put it. He goes on to say that most of the survivalists ended up dying alone in their bunkers. Gotcha, preppers. So much for all that effort you went through, you selfish, egotistical... Wait. If all the preppers or survivalists were prepared and still died, why did so many other people who weren't preparedness people survive? It's because they weren't paranoid, I guess. So, in this book, the author takes several digs at survivalists, mocking them for imagining or fantasizing about scenarios in which society collapses. In his book about society collapsing. In the pilot episode of Jericho, which I consider to be one of the greatest television shows of all time, we see another example of this. A nuclear attack has happened in the United States, which has cut the small town of Jericho, Kansas, off from the rest of the world. The mayor and sheriff's department determine there is only one ham radio in the town, so the mayor goes to see if they can use it. He approaches a dilapidated house. An old man, Oliver, pops out with a gun, because he is under the belief that they are under attack by aliens. He realizes that it's just the mayor, and when asked for his ham radio, says earnestly, "For you, 50 cents. Given $1, he goes inside for change. Now, they make him seem like a paranoid idiot. Maybe that's all it was, but if he's such an idiot, why was he the only person in town with a ham radio? A lot of these fiction works portray the preppers or survivalists as being more prepared for the scenario they are in than anyone else, but still mock them instead of using it as an example of the benefit of being prepared. This is a common theme. Take the person who had the most foresight, who planned ahead, and make them seem like the most selfish, brutal, crazy, or idiotic person. That way you can use them as a disclaimer. Even though we're going to show you a terrible disaster, we still want you to know that we don't think preparing for a terrible disaster is a rational thing to do. We're not, one of those preppers. In the world they create, they mock those who imagined a world like the ones they created. So, are those crazy people preppers? Maybe. Well, probably. Okay, yeah. But are they typical or representative of preppers? Not even a little. I think the crazies are just the only ones we always feel safe categorizing. I don't know if it makes people feel good to mock others who are doing what they're doing or encouraging, except the others are doing it better. If you want to get in shape, are you going to mock people who are in better shape than you? It happens. Those ultramarathoners are crazy. I'm just going to run a regular marathon. Well, here's news for you. Running a regular marathon is crazy to the rest of us. But are you going to accidentally slip into ultramarathoning or get so buff at the gym that you can't fit through the door? Nope. Are you going to accidentally slip into preparing for Doomsday and living in an off-grid bunker? Probably no. The negative use of the word prepper doesn't stop some of us from being prepared, but it might make a lot of people reluctant. This isn't just because they don't want to be called a prepper. It's because the common use of the word has made all preparedness seem irrational and antisocial. An emergency or disaster might come and go as a little hiccup, and we either get back to normal or become accustomed to the changes that have happened. And so, many people look at their life after and think, well, I'm doing okay now. Things turned out all right in the end. So what was all the hype about being prepared? Do not be confused with thinking preparedness is only for survival situations from which we never recover. It's not about the big one, it's about the little hiccups. If you attach preparedness to the end of the world, when it's not the end of the world, you excuse and dismiss preparedness. Making it through a bad experience is confirmation that you need to prepare, not an excuse to avoid it, because it's evidence that bad things happen, even if the world didn't end. There are many preppers who think about catastrophic, apocalyptic events and what they would do in that situation. These are the events that are low probability but high risk if they ever happen. So some people think about some extreme but unlikely events, and it's worth it to those people to prepare for them just in case. You don't have to think about the worst case scenario, just how your basic needs could be affected by any scenario. Humanity as a whole has survived every disaster they have faced throughout all the world's history. I know preparedness is largely about you as an individual, but when it comes to the worst disasters, the stuff movies are made about, the asteroid or zombies, the odds aren't very good that you'll survive anyway. No fault of your own, just being in the wrong place or something. When it comes to the serious end of the world scenarios, it's just statistics. There's probably not much you can do. If you survive, it will probably be because of luck. Then you can figure out what to do. For the rest of us, we can prepare for real disasters that have happened or are likely to happen, which can be pretty terrible, but still not the end of the world. Or they can be something that affects just us. Those situations for which we know being prepared, not just luck, plays a role in whether or not you live or die. So, what is a prepper? Who knows? You can be one if you want to be. If you say you are one, then you are. And if you say you're not, I guess you're not. If someone asks you if you're one of those preppers, you can answer yes or no. Or you can reframe the conversation by saying something like, I can't tell you about it because of operational security, or some other phrase that you don't understand. Or, that's our word for our people. Or, we prefer being called by our full name, the Church of Preparedness for the End Times. Or just saying something like, some people might call me a prepper, and maybe I am. But I really just prepare based on what makes sense. Bad things happen sometimes, and that doesn't mean the end of the world. But I'd be crazy not to make sure my family and I have what we need on hand. If you want to learn more, I know a preparedness guy you can follow online. He's called The Preparedness Guy. Thanks for watching. If you like my video, please like my video. Consider subscribing, where you'll be able to see all my future videos and all 3 of my past videos. You can hit the subscribe bell, but do it softly in case the kids are sleeping. If you have something to say, leave a comment. Thanks for joining me. Welcome to the team.